Hey there, my name is Sophia Hernandez, and on today's episode, we have one of the most hardworking, genuine people that I know. She has had her work published in various national publications, and she even started her own podcast called Black Fat Fashion. Today, in the spotlight, is Aiyana Ishmael. Obviously, me and you go way back. For those that don't know, we went to high school together. We were actually twinnies because we were put in like the same drama family. And for those who don't know you, can you just tell people a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm a graduating senior at Florida A&M University. I'm a freelance journalist. I have work in Teen Vogue, Essence, Pointer, The Nation. I'm also the student representative for the Online News Association, which is a journalism organization focused on digital media. And yeah, that's honestly the majority of me and just living life.
Where are you now? So right now you're out of Tallahassee?
Yes.
So Aiyana's in school. She's at FAMU right now. And even in school, she has all these accolades. Can you tell me a little bit? Again, I know you from way back when, and I know back then we would talk about your dreams and aspirations, and it's so amazing to see you finally live out your dream. When was like your pinnacle moment that you knew you wanted to get into journalism?
So I always tell people it was honestly once I was in community college. I had been going back and forth on what exactly I wanted to do. I think I've always been a creative. Like, we obviously come from a similar background. We've always been creatives. And so I grew up in theater. I grew up acting. And so for me, it was like I knew I loved the art of storytelling, but I knew I didn't love acting. And so once I graduated from Coral Reef, it was more so, I'm going to community college, let's figure out what we're going to do. And I happened to stumble across The Reporter, which is the student newspaper at Miami-Dade College. And I was just like, let me try it out. And I literally remember telling my mom, as soon as I got like my first like byline in the sports section at the newspaper, I was just like, this is it. Like, I love this. Like, I could see myself doing this for a long time. In what capacity, I didn't know yet, freshman year at community college, but I definitely knew that was the direction I need to go in. And so community college, I honestly think like that's the foundation of my journalism experience.
And from there, you went on to go to FAMU, which I know you like root for them all the time, as you should. And you're involved there in their publication and through their journalism school. How did you have that foundation, right? Working for university publications and then start freelancing, which is really what you do right now?
Yeah, so it honestly all came from this one great opportunity. And that's why I always tell people, just a quick backstory. For me, ONA, that's why I am their student representative. And the reason I wanted that position was because of like the love and support I got from that moment. But I had gotten a lot of no's in the months leading up to before I got selected for ONA's HBCU fellowship. And so I was feeling really down because I was just like, maybe this isn't like my career path. Maybe I shouldn't do this. I'm not getting any good internships. I'm not making the strides that I need to be making or that I thought I needed to be making. And so I was just very upset, but I got that call that I had gotten that fellowship. And so I attended ONA, and I remember it was two separate conversations, but the first woman I talked to, she was a Black woman, which I always appreciate because I feel like Black women to another Black woman are always going to tell you the truth. And she saw my resume. She said everything that I was doing. She was like, you're killing it, but why aren't you freelancing? And I was like, what? She was like, that's all good and dandy what you're doing, but you need to start freelancing. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I don't know what to do. How do I even become a freelancer? And so I actually ended up meeting with another woman who worked at the time at Bustle. And so I sat down with her for coffee at that conference, ONA, and I was just like, can you tell me how I should freelance? And so we talked it out. I kind of told her a couple ideas I had, and she actually liked one of my ideas, which ended up being my first piece in Teen Vogue, which was about how I felt that there weren't clothing opportunities for plus size college students in Tallahassee. And she was like, that's very niche, and I feel like that'd be a great story. So I think you need to pitch that. And so I was just like, let me shoot for it. And ONA really was the leading factor in my freelancing career because that solid advice I got from the beginning from that conference set me up for the rest of my career.
And I think you just brought up like so many questions for me, because I do think, you know, a lot of times journalism can be competitive, or maybe it's not competitive and it might seem like that just because there's so many people that are doing what you're doing and you're really trying to break through the mold and do your own thing. How did you cope with the no's? How did you kind of cope with that competitiveness, or what you felt was competitive?
Yeah. I think for me, I've always been a competitive person, so it was really hard to like not be winning because that was always my thing. Like I grew up in a sports family, so to me competition I didn't see as a bad thing. But like once I got into journalism, I realized okay, like you can't compete with anyone because your journey is so unique to yourself. And I think it came from having my road personally, my personal journey be slowed down in a sense, not in literal, but what it felt like because I didn't go straight to a big university directly after high school. I think anyone that goes to most like high schools, but Coral Reef was big on like people were going to like Ivy Leagues and UF, FSU. It was always big schools. And so to not be going to a big school directly after high school, that was like the first of many like lessons that I learned that, okay, I feel like I'm behind. And so I really had to start focusing on my own personal journey in that moment. So community college, I always thank because it helped me kind of put things into perspective. I realized that I can no longer try to compete with anyone else because, you know, my journey is unique. No one is me. No one went to community college, worked two jobs while trying to go to school and write for their newspaper and then transfer. Like no one is on my path specifically. So I can't compare myself to anyone else. And it's really easy to because I've just been blessed to be surrounded by such amazing and awesome friends that are all, like killing it in their respective lanes. But I had to take a step back and realize that just because they got to their destination faster than I did doesn't mean I'll never get to mine. And I think that's something that is hard, but you eventually start having to force yourself to like listen to it because it's the truth.
I think that that's literally amazing advice. And you were kind of saying that too earlier. You know, you've been blessed with so many mentors, role models. How did you, and from people that you knew previously and those that you didn't, how did you make those connections? How did you kind of say like, okay, I'm going to step out of my comfort zone. I'm going to go get coffee with this person and we're going to have like a real adult conversation about the rest of my life?
Yeah, I think for me, what's been helpful is the fact that I knew I had to grind. I knew I had to hustle because, as I said earlier, the different obstacles or roadblocks I felt were in my way, you know, starting off in community college, not getting that full 4-year experience. I was like, I know I need to catch up because journalism is big on networking. So I am a very personable person, which does make it easier. I do get nervous, but it is easier the fact that I don't mind talking to people, especially if I appreciate their work. So for me, I've always been big on like the worst they can say is no, and I've already heard a million no's, so I'm gonna reach out and try anyway. And it's always worked in my favor. I always would say one of my favorite experiences I had was when I decided I was going to a conference in New York City. My school was paying for it, and before I even like bought my flight, well, my school bought my flight to go to New York City. I had already emailed one of my favorite editors. Her name was Maya Allen, and she was working at Marie Claire at the time. Now she's the beauty director at InStyle. But I reached out to her via email and I was just like, hi, you went to Howard University. I go to FAMU, HBCU Connection. I really look up to you and I would love to just like talk to you and ask you how you got from Howard to Marie Claire. And she like literally appreciated that. She was like, wow, thank you so much for like even like knowing a little bit about me. Of course we can meet up. And so we met up. She took me up to the Marie Claire office. We talked for like an hour. And it's just that one connection that like made a difference in not only just my confidence, but me being like, okay, well, she did it. That means I can do it too. And so I think if you really wholeheartedly reach out to people that you look up to or admire, it makes it so much easier because you're not forcing yourself to do something. If anything, you're getting like an inside look into someone you follow on Instagram that you like are obsessed with.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times too, we think like, oh my gosh, they're not going to receive it well, or they're just not even going to look at it at all. And I think a lot of times we forget that these people are just like you and I, and they see it as a compliment, you know, and they would be more than happy to give any little insight that they can. So that's definitely some good advice. Let's go back to freelancing, because I know, you know, that I've always been very intrigued with how you got into it, the nuts and bolts of it. How did you kind of start putting your work out there and really reaching out to these organizations, these different publications? Did you just email them? Did you have a contact? How exactly did that work for those interested in freelance?
Yeah, so I always tell people I kind of not got lucky, but I think I hit a sweet spot because I actually pitched on my first piece. It was a fashion piece, and I pitched it to the assistant fashion editor at the time. Her name was Sarah Radden at Teen Vogue. And so I'd been following her on Instagram, and so I knew she was the assistant fashion editor. So I was just like, okay, let me try this out. Let me send an email. And so after I'd like basically kind of drafted that first email, I sent it to her. And I think it was like 4 days later, I remember getting an email back, and I was like, she saw it. She said yes. Like, what do you mean? And so for me, that was a good moment because I kind of hit that sweet spot of my first freelance byline being Teen Vogue. And it is like a true thing in journalism, like names carry weight. And so I think I've had an easier time getting into freelance because my first byline and my sole byline that I would use moving forward was from Teen Vogue. So it was like, okay, well, if she has a byline in Teen Vogue, that means obviously she can write, she can do this. So I think we can handle moving her into that kind of role. And so basically, it's a lot of emailing. I think people that are trying or interested in freelancing think it's like a quick, like one hit. Like I got lucky on my first time of doing like a freelance like pitch, but
Right.
there were so many, no thank you, we're going to pass on this between my next accepted article, you know? And
Right.
so I think people have to realize it is a constant game of give or take because it's not solely based off of your article wasn't good, but then you also have to look at the fact that financially, okay, maybe they don't have any more money in their budget to pay a freelance writer. So they're not going to accept your work, not because your idea wasn't good, but because they don't have the budget. And so it's a constant game of like, okay, I think this article could work here. Let me pitch to her. Oh, she doesn't need it right now. Let me try to rework it and pitch it to another publication. She said, oh, she doesn't have the budget right now. Come back in a month. You make the decision. Do you want to wait a month or do you want to try to pitch to someone else? And so I always make jokes that like my life as like a part-time freelancer on the side is just sending emails.
And it's definitely true. I feel like you've got to logistically block out because it's like you almost have to, because you're writing that one article, but you're also writing other ones for other
Yeah.
publications in the meantime. So it's like you really have to be so disciplined and organized. Um, Question for you, because we talk about your worth, right? And I think if anybody's ever met Aiyana, she is like, again, like I said, the most genuine person, but also like I feel like you just know who you are. And a lot of times with freelance, I think that that's hard is like how much are you worth? Like what are you worth? And like
Exactly.
how do you know how to communicate that to the people who are buying your work or interested in your writing? How have you gone about that?
Yeah, so that's actually something I'm still figuring out because I'm very new to the game. But as I'm like now getting more involved into freelancing, following other freelancers and learning about rates, I think that's the biggest thing you start realizing. Like some publications don't pay a lot, like it doesn't matter even who you are, because that's also how it works in the industry. Like depending on your level of journalism, you could get like $800 an article. And so that's like always like the goal to work
Yeah,
up
that's
to. But
that's
I think
awesome.
starting off when you start figuring out numbers. And so now I'm going on, I want to say I have now like, if not 7 or 8 freelance articles written. And so I kind of gotten to see a range of prices. And so some publications pay more than others. And as you write more for publication, like with Teen Vogue, the more I've written with them, the more my price goes up. So like I've written articles that my first article I wrote for them was $100. And then the next one that I wrote was like 250. And then the other one, my most recent one was $300. And so the price just keeps going up. And like other publications pay more. Right now, I'm working on a story for another publication, and they're paying me literally $450. And then I just sending back in my first round of edits for another publication, and they're paying me $500 for that article. And so I think it starts varying on the publication, and like prices are crazy, but I definitely think it's worth once you start really getting into it. Now that I know like what my like work is worth, I'm going to be like, okay, if you're going to go under that, like, and it's even saying no sometimes. I'm in a Slack group, basically for all student journalists who freelance. And so a friend of mine actually asked a good question. She was like, how do you say no to someone that
I
is
think that
trying
that's
to pay you
so
low?
important. Yeah, so important.
And it's just, you have to say no sometimes. And it's like, if you think that article is worth more than what they're trying to give you, it's worth it to say no, because like it's still, at the end of the day, like if we were full-time freelancers, this is how we would be paying rent and putting food on our plate. And so I feel like just because we're students and we're doing this partially for the experience, we still deserve to get the same amount of money. So I think definitely knowing your worth is so important. And it's scary, but they're just gonna see what you're gonna do. And if they say, okay, well, we can't give you that, then walk away. It's fine. There will be another publication, I promise you.
Yeah. And in those moments where you feel like, you know, is my work enough? Is it enough? And like, you have so much on your plate. You're in school, you do all these different publications, freelancing, you have your podcast, which we'll talk about in a second. You have so much on your plate. How do you know, like, how do you hype yourself up when you kind of are just feeling like, is this too much? Am I even doing the right thing? Like, am I doing enough?
Yeah, I've kind of the pandemic has really helped me with this mindset change. I think I've really evolved and realized that, you know, time is precious and like my mental health is so important. I think I've gone through like so many stages where I just mentally was not okay. And it was because I was trying to move like way too fast. And it's like, you can't do that to yourself. And so my biggest thing now is I no longer put any kind of pressure. I used to like, a year ago, I would have been like, I'm going to be editor in chief of Vogue by the time I'm 24. And it's like, what if I don't get there, you know? And like, what is that going to do to my mental state if I'm 24 and I'm like, oh no, I'm not the editor in chief of Vogue. Like that is going to like break me. And so I feel like for me, it's become more so focused on my health and my happiness, and my work is an extension of me, but is not all of me. And so
I love that.
I no longer look at, oh, I need to do something. I need to be on the next move. Because honestly, the fact that I've slowed down in the sense of trying to reach goals, I've actually gotten more things. Like, I can't really say right now because I don't know when it's going to happen. But this summer, I'll be working for a really amazing publication. And I'll also be working a part of another institute that I'm really excited for also this summer. And these are like two amazing publications that I like would like scream. Like I would have never, if you'd have told me freshman year at Miami-Dade College I was going to be working for them this summer, I wouldn't have believed you because I didn't think I could get there. But I think it's so important to just allow yourself to exist. Like I no longer say I have to do anything by a certain time frame. I tell myself, if this is what you want, go after it. But if it's not dire, like let's just like sleep today. Let's work out today. Let's call your mom. Like let's do something fun. And I think the pandemic has put that more into my focus about my life, because I could like not be a journalist tomorrow, but like who would I be outside of that, you know? And so I've really been focusing on not making journalism my whole world. It is such a large part of me because I love telling people stories. I love bringing a platform to people that don't have it. And so I will always love it. But I think I have been focused more so on myself and who I am, Aiyana by herself solely, not Aiyana the journalist. And that's made my work better because, you know, when I'm actually working, I know it's because I care about something, and I know it's because I'm doing it because I love it.
Yeah, a work-life balance, I think, is key to any profession, quite honestly. And it is funny because I think in COVID, it could have gone one of two ways, right? Like you're either at home, you have no, let's say, office space, and like you're trying to differentiate between like, okay, this is my house, this is my safe space, this is my relaxation space, versus this is where I go to work and like really dial in. And it is a process, like you said. I really think it's just like you got to go with it, go with the flow. And I think you've mastered it pretty well, honestly. And even so much so that you have started a podcast, probably what, like almost a year now, more or less?
It's been, yeah. I started it feels like forever ago, but it's going on probably like 8 months, 9 months now.
Yeah. And it is. So for those who don't know, Black Fat Fashion, it is the BFF podcast. It's what you've always wanted to listen to, didn't know you needed. And Aiyana has brought that to the forefront. Can you tell us why you came up with this podcast? What kind of inspired you and wanted to do that? Like, okay, like this is the right time to finally dive into it.
I think for me personally, I've always been obsessed with fashion. Like even I was like just younger, the shows I would watch, seeing designers, runway. For at one point in time, I was like, I want to be a model. But it was just like I've always.
Hey, that one point in time, you could still be a model.
I know, right?
You can still be Vogue editor-in-chief.
It's just like I definitely think I could do it. But either way, I've just appreciated the art of fashion. But I think when I started to get into journalism more, I realized there's so much in the fashion industry yet to be written about, discussed, discovered, that kind of thing. And I felt like people weren't giving fashion the credit it deserved. Like even when I said, oh yeah, I want to work for a fashion magazine one day, people were like, oh, that's not real journalism. And I like would get offended because I'm like, no, people at Elle and Marie Claire and Bazaar, they're doing like real journalist work. Like, and you can't discredit that because they also get to have fun and be creative and have another outlet with fashion. That's not fair to say. And so I think for me, I've always loved the like in between balance of journalism and fashion and creative and art. And so being a Black woman, you know, who is plus size, loving fashion, I always was just like, you know, now we're seeing more plus size designers like creating work for plus size people, and just of course more Black women and men in the industry. But I just felt like, you know, their voices should be at the forefront, and that was something I wanted to know because honestly the people that I'm interviewing are people that I look up to, whether they're editors or stylists or designers. They're people that I would either hope to work next to one day or hope to hire on if I'm working at a magazine one day, that kind of thing. And so I really wanted a space where I could talk to people that I follow on Instagram, that I look up to, that I'm friends with, that I could just talk to about their fashion career and how they plan to get there. Because I just think it's an important conversation for other young Black people. I know people have reached out to me and told me, oh my gosh, like I didn't know I needed to like hear this podcast, just like you said, like, but like I love it. And I think that's so important because it's such a small corner of the world, I feel like, that people sometimes need to listen to it. And even if you're not into fashion, I think it's just great conversations because, you know, I had someone on my podcast that also went to our high school, Aaliyah. She's working, you know, in fashion, and she made great points. You know, she always ran from fashion because people told her she wasn't actually going to make a career out of it. And so she was like, I'll just be a fashion lawyer, or I'll be a really like nice doctor that dresses well. And she made a really great point. She was like, why am I running from the one thing I keep going back to? And I just felt like
Right.
fashion for so many people is like, it's an amazing industry that you want to be a part of. But, you know, being a person of color, being fat, you know, you're not treated the same way as if you were a skinny white woman in that industry. And I think it's not fair. And so having those conversations with other Black men and women has been so nice for me, but also for other people, because you get to really learn about how they got to where they are. And I think that's just what it's all about.
And I think fashion too, like the whole point of it is this inclusivity, right? It's so that
Yeah.
everybody in their own individual sense feels confident, and they each have, everybody has their own sense of style. Like mine's different than yours and yours is different than somebody else's. So, but I think you also, like, what's so special to me about this podcast is you're providing that for people who maybe didn't see themselves in that industry, you know, or like
Yeah.
didn't think that they had their own inclusive space in fashion. And like, newsflash, everybody does. So it's amazing that, you know, you have this podcast and it's been doing so well. A part of me wants to ask, what is like your life mantra? Because again, Aiyana is just, you have your fingers and your toes in so many different things, and you've managed to do it all amazingly. But also, I think you yourself have just grown so much from that girl that was in Miami-Dade, you know, working for that student paper, to the woman that you are today, who's now, I mean, your whole future is in front of you. What is like the one thing that you live by that kind of gets you through?
So it's kind of a mixture of two things. And they're both quotes, so I kind of just like intertwine into my life. But one is one that was my senior quote, and I still live by it to this day. And it's just be fearless in the pursuit of what sets your soul on fire. And I think as simple as it is, it's so important because I live off of passion. Like people always ask me like, how do you keep going? How do you care so much about other people? It's because I'm passionate about this. Like I'm passionate about helping other people in journalism. I'm passionate about helping other Black women and men. I'm passionate about helping anyone that, you know, is also passionate about this industry or anything at all. And I feel like that's what drives me. And that makes me fearless. I'm not afraid to stand up against something that I feel like is wrong or shouldn't be happening because, you know, I have to. And if I care about something, I'm going to go after it full force. And that's how I feel. And another thing is something that I actually found, I think, want to say either if not in middle school and early high school as well. But it's just another quote that that drives me. I am a very like religious person. I came from a religious background, but it's when I stand before God at the end of my life, I would hope that I would not have an ounce of talent left. And I could say I used everything He gave me. And I feel like that really puts my life into perspective because life is so short. The pandemic has really taught us that like someone can be gone tomorrow. And so I don't want to spend a single day on this earth, not even just career, But like with anything, like I want to use everything like the Lord gave to me, because he obviously put me here for a purpose, and he gave me a lot of amazing things that I can do and I can change this world. And I wholeheartedly believe that. And so I try to live every day. You know, if this is my last, I want to be make sure when I get when I get up to him, I tell him I killed it. I did everything I was supposed to do. And that's just how I feel like now. Like, I feel like life is just so short. I want to live every day and to the fullest, because we have to.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm no God, but I could tell you, you are changing the game, my friend. You always have, you will continue to do so. You continue to amaze me and everybody else that knows you. So thank you for taking the time to join us here on the Spotlight. If you want to get social links for Black Fat Fashion and for Aiyana, they will be linked down below. But we will see you next week with another episode of the Spotlight.